Hello again. This is Jared Case, Curator of Film Exhibitions at the Dryden Theater and the George Eastman Museum. And we're here today to tell you about one of the new titles at the virtual cinema for the Dryden Theater, which you can go online to eastman.org, rent the film, and help out the Dryden a little bit in these times when we're closed. The film that we're talking about today is The Audition, directed by Ina Weissla and starring Nina Haas, who is probably most familiar for her work in Barbara and Phoenix, at least in the United States. And I have a very special guest with me to talk about the film today, and his name is James Van Demark. He has a long history with both film and musical performance. He's currently the professor of double bass and the co-chair of string at the Eastman School of Music. Please welcome James Van Demark.
Thank you very much, Jerry.
So, did this film, based on your experience with film and with musical performance, did it have anything that resonated with you in particular, whether it's the little things or the overall, that maybe we should talk a little bit about what the film is about. It's called The Audition. Maybe you should explain the plot a little bit and get into it.
Well, certainly an audition is one of the most critical things for any classical music performer. And it's something that all of us undergo from the time that we're children, teenagers, through our adult life in auditioning for concerto performances to become a member of a symphony orchestra. It's part and parcel of the profession of getting into music. And one of the things that, among many others, that I found so striking and real about this admittedly very intense drama is that it captures in so many complex levels the challenge of the audition and all of the potential things that can go right and go very wrong, both for the student auditioning and also for the teacher, in this case, particularly. So it's a very, very rich and frankly realistic film. It, for me, portrays many things that, alas, some music teachers are probably disturbed with in terms of what they bring to lessons, which was quite fascinatingly portrayed, and also treatment of students, and also what just an occasional student might undergo. Here's the fictionalized portion of this, perhaps. But it is both an absolutely engaging and frankly terrifying look into the world of music and what might go right and wrong in the world of music.
Yeah, that's great to hear, because it was a fascinating deep dive into this world that a lot of people on the outside don't get to see. But I'd like to talk about the main character, the Nina Haas character, for a little bit. There's a couple of aspects that I think are particularly interesting. I'd like to have your insight on. As an instructor in a music school, there are auditions just to get into the school. And at the beginning, she takes this student and sort of puts her reputation on the line, or she vouches for him in a way. And I'm wondering if there is some sort of professional risk that she's taking there by putting that on the line.
That was a marvelously realistic portrayal, and frankly, that happens all the time. It's a wonderful kind of neutral introduction to what else will happen in this film, but that is very realistic, and I could have seen myself in that setting, as would many of my colleagues. You know, every year we would have this kind of ongoing quick debate. Well, think this person is going to make it? Well, will so-and-so make it through the 6-month trial, which is one of the things that comes up in the audition.
And the other thing that she has going for her is that she has also been instructing her own son in violin. and she deals with people on a regular basis, or students on a regular basis, that surpass her own son's capability, and she tends to come down hard on him because of, she feels that if he practiced more, he would be able to catch up to that, and it's just not the case. I know that, I could relate to that in terms of baseball and the teams that I coach, but in terms of music, as that happens, and it has to happen, how do people deal with that as children?
Oh, does it ever happen? Talk about visiting the sins of the father or mother upon the child. Absolutely. There's not just a sense of stage parents, which actually it comes up here decidedly more amplified because the stage parent is in fact a musician. I've seen it for decades, and sometimes it has a happy ending, and parents and child live happily ever after, and sometimes it does not.
Hmm. Um, she, without giving away too much, I think part of that falls back on what is perceived or intimated at as a failing in her own performance. So she's trying to make up for it or live through her own son,
Right.
and possibly that could lead into some of the student uh, teacher relationship as well, and having her own reputation be part of that student's performance.
Absolutely. That's very common. Living vicariously through your students. um, right. And sometimes that's a good thing. Again, sometimes not.
And had you has seen any of Nina Haas's films before?
No, I hadn't. I'd heard of her and I hadn't seen any of her films. I thought she was absolutely brilliant in this. I read that, in fact, she's a pretty fine pianist and a
Hmm.
decent singer. So she did learn how to at least brilliantly fake playing the violin. I mean, it is really extraordinarily well done in this. She insists that she learned it. She had a very sort of marvelous description about how playing the violin for her necessitated much more of an intuitive feeling for the left hand as opposed to playing the piano. She radiates that, but you sense also this discomfort for her in playing, which is also part of the character. And that was great. Ina Weisse, the director, had been a violinist for 13 years and, in fact, chose most of the selections that are performed throughout the film. And they're brilliantly adapted for this setting of teenage students, particularly, and a few other things that play into the plot also.
That was something I didn't even think to ask about whether the playing was accurate or realistic, but having the background for both of them completely makes sense. In addition to having a female director who was an actress and a performer, directing a female actress who is an actress and a performer, and
Right.
getting that kind of performance out of her.
Right, exactly. And the tie-in of the characters and their presumed accomplishments in music with what they could show was, I thought, absolutely terrific, including those by the male lead, Simone Kering, who plays Philippe, who's the luthier, the string repair guy,
Yeah.
Anna's, Nina Haas's husband in this, who has earlier on this beautiful but kind of amateurish rendition of a birthday song to his wife early on in the film. And it's just absolutely one of the most touching moments early on.
Well, because that performance, whether it's music or it's acting, uh, technical virtuosity doesn't necessarily mean that you are emoting or getting the message of that piece across.
Right. And that is also one of the striking hallmarks of this film, in that it opens with, and again, you don't see the performer, but you hear the performance at the audition of one of the Paganini caprices, this ferociously fast and difficult technical piece that some kid, presumably, is playing on stage for the audience of auditioning teachers. And you hear the kid struggling through all the arpeggios, and it hits a couple of interesting strings, and they say, okay, next. But that sort of sets the tone for how the teaching goes in this from Nina Haas. Faster, 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 tempo. It's demanding, and you keep seeing this both through her character, her teaching, the drive. Something also that struck me was the cutting between scenes in this. No fades, there are no dissolves, even though it might have a diminuendo of volume. Next scene. It's all the way through, no exceptions. So there's a real drive through this film to its climax. Fascinatingly done.
And we should mention a little bit about your background in film. So this is the perfect person to have this conversation with because it's a film about music,
Right.
and you've been involved both in film production and in musical performance and instruction. But you talking about the editing, is there anything else about the direction that struck you?
Right. There was one thing that really blew me away. This is a movie, in a sense, that has, you could say it's about the music profession, becoming a musician at one level. There's also no film score to this.
Mm-hmm.
There is no score at all. It's only pieces that are being performed, or you hear them, and you see it usually, or you'll hear it kind of in the background, but they are performed. There is no score. So one of the great things about this film, I think, is that characters or the score does not give away their reaction. It does not lead to anything. It's a gesture, a big one, a small one, generally pretty subtle, but often leading to something very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in a sense, it's amplified by not having a score.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the production design as well, because there's definitely a difference between inside the institute where these children are learning and how it's dark and brown, and there might be a little light coming in through the windows, but then she reflects that in the apartment that the family shares as well. And Philippe's shop is not that way, and outside when you're not, filming, it's not that way. But it's
Right.
really sort of a inhibiting force just being in this world of music.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great insight. One of the scenes that strikes me as also one of the most powerful, in a sense, is a scene in Philippe's darkened shop, where in fact he is trying out a cello on the workbench.
Mm-hmm.
And he's playing it, and they're talking about the quality of how it's improved. And he says, it's aged. And that plays into things that have aged, maybe well, maybe not so well. And yet there's a beautiful, beautiful, rapturous, romantic moment there that also comes up with a choice of a Brahms piano quartet, again, in the background. And it's actually presumably a recording of Anna Nina Haas playing as a much younger person.
Right.
There's some really, really touching things. And one of the other things that I love talking about production design is the use of the staircase in the conservatory, which has some terrific foreshadowings of what's to come. I really loved how that was used. Very clever.
Well, and it's thematically, it's each of these students, they're trying to get to that next level, and when you're achieving something, it doesn't always work out the best for you. I'm sorry giving away too much.
But it's really intriguing, and it has got a lot of subtlety and a lot of other things too. It has a wallop at the end. I'll leave it at that.
So this is going to be available on the Eastman.org website. You can go to eastman.org/Dryden-Theater and find all of our current selections in the Dryden Theater Virtual Cinema. I would like to say thank you so much for joining us, James. And
My
if you
pleasure.
have any final thoughts, this is going to be live on June 26th, Friday, June 26th. So if you have any final thoughts on the film or anything else.
I hope many people will enjoy this. It is not your typical, it is not a Hollywood film, but it is something that has a lot of richness, tremendous subtlety, and a lot of power.
Thank you so much. It's a wonderful bit to end on. And please don't be a stranger coming down the street. Come see some movies at the Dryden Theater when we open back up.
Absolutely. Thank you.